Kira, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Kira, beyond being a 1 million years of joy leadership luminary, you also specialize in diversity, inclusion, and leadership. Was there a pivotal moment in your life or career that led you to find your purpose and to the work that you do today?
Wow. There's not one moment, but there is a story. There's a whole context behind it. So, because of my father's job, I moved around quite a bit when I was younger. Right now, I'm living in my ninth country. So we had to travel. We changed. I changed schools. I went to I think 10 different schools. So I had the experience of being the new person quite a few times. And that's an experience that's in me, right? It's in my body. And what also happened is one of these nine countries is also Trinidad and Tobago, which is a fascinating country in the Caribbean. And there I had the opportunity, I would say it that way, to be a minority, being a Latin American white woman. And it's interesting as an experience also. And I think I've always been very moved by people that not necessarily the mainstream or the most popular way of being. Even from school, I've always defended that, the person who has that different voice or I just always thought it was very important. And later on, I studied law, so I'm a lawyer, because I wanted to be the voice for the voiceless. Ended up deciding that that wasn't the way. It wasn't so easy. And eventually, I found what I do today, which is consulting in leadership and a lot of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging work, which is something I'm very, very passionate about. But I think that the whole experience, my physical experience, my life experience, has led me to the work I'm doing today.
Thank you so much for sharing. I find that absolutely fascinating. How was that exposure to different cultures bring a different perspective or maybe a similar perspective on the topic of joy?
I was born in Venezuela. My mother's Chilean and my father's Argentinian. After Venezuela, we moved to Argentina, then Spain, then Australia, then back to Argentina, then Trinidad and Tobago. That's where I did my high school. Then I went on an exchange student program to France for a year, where I lived with a French family, which was a fascinating experience. Then I moved back to Trinidad and Tobago for a year, then Argentina, and that's where I went to law school. Then I went to Canada for 3 years. And then I moved to Chile for 5, England for 3, and now back to Chile. And it's been 5 years now. So, yeah, lots of moves because of my father's work. So, lots of moves when I was younger. And there's something that is called a TCK, Third Cultured Kids. And it's everybody who's grown up in different countries and moved around between 0 and 18 years have a sense of belonging to other people with a similar lifestyle. And so you kind of connect, and that's one of the ways I identify myself, right, as a TCK. But going back to your question, right, how has culture and different cultures impacted joy in my life? I'll try to answer the question in different parts. One, I think there's certain cultures that have a tendency or an easier way to feel joy, as if joy is closer to them. And I do think that Trinidad and Tobago, in that sense, the culture in the Caribbean just has a predisposition, if that's the word in English, right? Just more open to a sense of joy. And maybe that's because of the climate, maybe that's because culturally is the values that that culture holds. I'm not sure why. I'd have a hard time identifying why. But I do think that some places help you be closer to joy. Some cultures, some contexts just help you, like inch you closer to that experience. And another thing I would say is that in this lifestyle of moving around so much, there was something in my household that my parents would keep telling us. And it was a sense of gratitude in that you could be having a hard time in the new school or trying to figure out, your new teachers, whatnot. But they would always say, figure out what it is available in this country, say a sport or something new, and enjoy it. Check what's available, enjoy what's available. And so it was, again, just this sense of you have an opportunity, In the next country, you're going to have another opportunity. How are you going to take it? How are you going to face it? So there's a sense of gratitude that I feel is very basic on how you build that joy.
So beautiful. I feel there's so much richness to what you've gone through.
Absolutely. I think and that definition of a joyful life is very specific to each person, right? And it can also be dynamic, because that joyful life at 15 is not going to be the same one as at 45 in the same person, right? You're going through different stages of life, different realities, and that search for that joy is going to be completely different. But I completely agree with you. This upbringing has helped me have a vision of the human being. I'm very curious of the human experience. I'm constantly fascinated. And I would say that's one of the things that led me to being an executive coach, to get to know the other person in depth. I'm so curious about how they see the world, because I know they see it different from me, and not judging it, respecting it. But I'm curious to see how they see it. And I also have a sense that you can learn from anybody and everybody. And if you haven't learned something from the person that you have in front of you, it's because you haven't spent enough time or asked the right questions. I think there's value in every single one.
What have you learned about unconscious biases that individuals have as a result of whatever experiences they may have had? And how do you integrate that in order to coach or inspire leaders to find an equal footing and basically not lead through the lens of a biased mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest thing with unconscious bias is to accept that we all have it. I have unconscious bias constantly. We all have it. And accepting that has been, for myself, accepting my own unconscious bias and being able to facilitate spaces for other people to see their own unconscious bias in order to be able to deal with it and interrupt it. That has been powerful. Sometimes it's frustrating, because you'll have those spaces, those aha moments in those insights, and then life just comes, and you go back to your default. And that's why it's so important to maintain certain spaces. It could be coaching, it could be meditating, certain spaces only with the only purpose of lifting your head out of the water, right? In order to realize what you're doing, to be conscious of what you're doing, and to interrupt those bias. But absolutely, the unconscious bias, we all have them. We have to all accept them in order to be able to interrupt them. And
So,
anybody who says that they don't have an unconscious bias, I challenge them.
how can we help our listeners discover their unconscious biases?
I think when you have a repeating thought that is too structured, if you're too sure of something, I'd question it. Too sure of a thought of somebody else or a group of people. And something I like to do is to, like we say, we flip the chart, say, if you were saying the same thing about this other person, right? If you would you say the same thing about a woman? Would you say the same thing about a man? When you flip it, then you hear it. You realize, your brain kind of disconnects and says, "Whoa, wait." So I think that flipping the speech and taking it with another group of people and saying, does that sound off? Yeah, if it sounds off, then it's a bias that's very active.
For the leaders listening today that may want to create a more adaptive and inclusive culture, what advice would you have for them?
When we're looking at adaptive leadership, right, and inclusive leadership, we have to differentiate between why we're doing something, how we're doing it, and what we are doing. And I think many times the why we are doing it is, thought as an objective rather than a purpose. And so that's one thing to differentiate. Okay, what's our purpose? A higher purpose that is, taking us where we need to go. The objective is something much more concrete. And then there's the task, the what we are doing, right? That is very clear. I think one of the big things that leaders need to look at is how they are doing things. dynamics in the team. Are people speaking up? Are they challenging? Why are they not challenging? Who challenges? Who doesn't challenge? What's the psychological safety in the team? Diversity is something that is very important, but without the psychological safety in the team or in the organization in order to speak up and eventually get to the belonging, right? And the diversity in itself won't be enough, because diversity is just, the fact that we're different and that we think differently. Not only our identities, but also how we think. But in order for that to be value to the team, to the organization, you need to create a space in order for that to come out. And I think a lot of times we're so specific, we're so concentrated in the task that we're not concentrated in the how. And the higher you go up in leadership, the more important that is in terms of strategic, in terms of moving the organization, in terms of how I'm a symbol for this change, how I'm showing up, how I'm directing and communicating and being in the space.
How can we connect the dots between engagement and equitable organizations that really foster inclusion, different perspectives, and truly nurture psychological safety in an optimal way?
If we don't have different points of view, there's no way we're going to be able to think differently. And if we don't think differently in the way the world is going, that at the speed that the world is changing and the flexibility of mind that we need organizations to have that same capability. And if we don't practice it beforehand, right now, the changes are just exploding, right? Moore's law, right? It's exponential. So we need to practice this muscle, that being able to adapt quickly individually and collectively in organizations. And that's something that we need to do right away. Anybody who's not thinking about their adaptive capacity is behind. And in terms of engagement, I think there has to be a difference between types of organizations. And when there are organizations that are purpose driven, that are magnets to people that speak to that purpose, right? And that, are attracting the right talent. The engagement is a consequence, right? Because there's an internal alignment with the company and what they're doing. I think the engagement levels are so low in many companies because they forget why we're doing it. There's a misalignment from the get-go in some companies, and in other companies they had a very very clear mission, but that purpose, maybe the organizational purpose, but maybe the team's purpose also is lost. And so maybe great, I understand why we're doing it, but in the team I'm having a really hard time understanding my job or what I have to do, or there's dynamics in the team that are very complicated, and that directly affects the engagement, right? Not only the organizational, but in a team space, in the smaller space. And I think that's also relevant. How is it that leaders in their teams, not only leaders of the whole organization, leaders in their teams, start looking at what's going on in their dynamic and what's the psychological safety that they're bringing to the table, and that it's something that you have to work on consistently. It's not something you do once and then it just stays for a semester. No, it's something that you have to work at every day, and you have to manage it. And this doesn't mean have pool tables at the office and have comfortable seating. No, it means, it's not cushy, it's not feathery. Is there a holding space in order for us to be able to talk frankly? Is there a space where I won't feel judged when I speak out? Is there a space when stress is high because there's something going on externally and I can go back to the team and figure it out? Even if attention in the team is high because we're worried, but we know that we can figure it out. And here's the difference between stress and tension, right? Stress is something that comes from outside, and tension can be inside. And it's something that I'm activated, right? So that we can work together. And activated doesn't mean I'm at a point where I could be at a fight, flight, free mode, but at a space where I'm concentrated in this, and we're together feeling that we can move this whatever I have to do, move to the objective. I think I went everywhere with the answer.
You touched upon an important point that connects to purpose. I was wondering if you could maybe share your views on how you see the connection between individual purpose and corporate purpose or team purpose.
I'm thinking of a coachee that works in mining, and that's harder to mine copper in this country is very important. And her individual purpose is not to mine copper, right? But it is to bring more women into the industry. So the alignment between individual purpose and organizational purpose doesn't have to be like a direct line, but it does have to be aligned, in order for individuals to feel good and feel that they can bring things to the table and that that they're valued. There are other industries that are much easier to have the alignment of individual purpose and organizational purpose, but it's in the industries that are trickier, that is not what they do but how they do it, that is more important. So in this case, the mining, what they do, extract copper. How they do it? Well, looking for talent, in a broader talent pool that includes women in an industry that before did not have women. And that really calls people that want to mobilize that change in the industry and in the country. It gives them a force. It gives them power in order to, you know, go through the struggles, because it's not going to be easy, but most times things that are not that easy are worthwhile. No, somebody else would have done it.
Indeed. And if you could give one mindset shift to every listener to help them live with more purpose, what would it be?
It's a tricky question, because if I'm being very, very honest, right, when it depends on the moment in life that you're in. I'm at a moment where I have two very young kids, and balancing family life and work life, not easy moments. So question about purpose is huge. It's a big, big question. But what I would say is that purpose is dynamic, and that's okay. You don't necessarily have to have one life purpose all the way, but you do have to have a purpose. It is important to find it, to search for it. And even in the moments that are tougher, juggling life, for example, whatever you're juggling, that purpose can really ground you and help you organize, what's priority, what's important, and what's urgent. So you don't have to marry just one purpose for the rest of your life. You can have different purposes at different moments of your life, but do find it. Do the work, search for it, go through the process. It's worthwhile, because it will help you lead a much more joyful life.
I was curious to get your views on parenthood as a result of you having two young kids. How has your life changed? And how has your purpose actually changed as a result of these new responsibilities?
Yeah. Motherhood is, whew, you can't prepare for it, right? It doesn't matter how honest your friends were about it, or how honest your mother was about it, or how much you read. It didn't matter how many conversations I had and how much I thought I was prepared. It's really eye-opening. I never thought I'd enjoy it as much as I actually do. And I never thought it would be as challenging as I also find it, like in both ways. And I do think that it has changed my purpose, um, because I have different levels of purpose now, right? Before I wanted to change the world, and I still want to change the world. But I also know that I want to be able to change their world, and in the space that I can hold for them in order to grow and be joyful and have a happy life, So I know the world's out there, and I want to still change the world, and I'm doing the work in order to make that changes outside. But at the same time, I'm having the second purpose, which is creating that space for my two boys to grow with everything that they need, especially emotionally, right? Yeah. So yeah,
How old are they?
they're 6 and 2.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah.
So much fun. As a result of being a mother, do you now look at the definition of unconditional love in a different way than you did before?
Yes. And actually, I would say that the word love for children, like the way I feel about my children, and I think there are other mothers that feel that way about their children. I think the word love is not enough. I feel it's even greater than that. It's a vibration. It's on a different plane. So sometimes yeah, unconditional love, but in big capitals, unconditional, and it's a force. It is life changing. It's absolutely life changing. I thought, and the way you see the world changes, and I think it's not for everybody. I don't think everybody should go into parenting. I think it's a decision that really changes your life. That is challenging like you'd never imagine, and it's something that I think it's very good that generations now are having a really good debate about it, and having, if they decide to go into parenting, then to do it consciously, not just because the stakes are too high.
Do you feel that as a result of you choosing to become a mother and form a family, has that had any sort of impact on how you now look at your professional realm? I know you mentioned that you still want to change the world, but the reality is there's just 24 hours in a day. And managing two young kids, it's a huge, huge responsibility. Some listeners that may be contemplating the possibility, or even they may have a desire, right, to have children, maybe it's particularly for women, they may think that it could hinder their potential advancements within corporations, and that becoming a mother could actually stand in the way of their ambitions on a
Mm.
professional level. What
Mm.
thoughts would you have for those specific women that are in that moment of deciding, do I become a mother or not? And especially if you're feeling like a pull and a drive to actually want to become one.
Yeah. I think if you're feeling that drive, then that's something powerful. Um, and and the realities, because we're in different countries, because there are different industries, the reality could be very different for each woman. But I do think that the motherhood penalty exists. It's not something made up. And I do think that there's a lot of us doing many things in order to change that. Is the work done? No. Is there a long way to go? Yes. Do men have a lot to do in this conversation? Yes. When the balance between life, isn't just a conversation about women, rather than a conversation that men, how much they take on their 50% in heterosexual relationships. It's very important. And that's part of, how we go into the future and how this balances off. But if I'm talking to women that are right there deciding if they're going to take the leap or not, have an honest conversation with yourself. Not with your parents, not with your partner. That might not sound very popular, but I do think that is a very personal choice. And if you think you want to go through this experience, if you're curious about it, if there's something in you that, is enlightened, right? It's turned on, right? Then wonderful. But if you feel that it's not something for you, then that's okay too. There are many other ways to mother, and I think that's also something that should be in the conversation. You can mother in other ways and other people. There's lots of mothers that need help, and having a tribe around is so important. But it is one of the most fascinating experiences that I am living.
Yes, and it's an experience that is irreversible because sometimes we make decisions and we can change our mind, but
Yeah.
motherhood, parenthood is irreversible. We can't turn back the clock and shift directions, change lanes. This
Yeah.
is it. You're embarking for the long term, and it's really interesting what you were sharing because at one point earlier in my career, I was just so focused on professional progression that I was actually having second thoughts about should I even become a mother, and we were having
Mm.
conversations with my husband, and my husband was also bringing forward the reality of the biological clock, right? Like we cannot continue having this conversation
Hmm.
forever because if you really want a healthy child, then minimize the risk also for the mother. So we were having these conversations. I know you suggested that, have a conversation with yourself, but if I would have had that conversation only with myself, my direction would have been, Andrea, prioritize only your professional growth. And actually, I have to say that I'm so grateful for my husband for actually bringing a fresh perspective. And we decided to take the leap, and it was really a joint decision. And I have to say that it has turned out to be one of the most joyful experiences of my life, and something that I never even thought I would enjoy or desire. I was not at the, huge desire and I have a calling to become a mother. It was really not the case. And it's almost as if my experience of unconditional love has just been like so heightened from day one, that I just feel it's one of the biggest blessings in life, at least in my life. That has been
Mm,
my experience.
mm.
So I think every one of us lives this in different ways, but once you make the decision, you truly have to be 100% in.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, and then I'll put a nuance. Actually, something very similar happened to me, with my partner having that instinct of wanting to be a father much more alive than I did. And that's how the conversation went, very similar to what you're saying. But right before the decision, I had that space with, will I, that conversation with myself, will is it what I really want? And that's what, actually, yes, I do want. Yeah. And it's an unconditional love, and agree, a joy that, um and very, very small things, right, that they do, that connects to like the human, right, like you see a human being in its most raw form, and it's fascinating in order to then look at the world, right, you're understanding the human experience in a very crude, raw way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So when you think about the future of leadership,
Mhm.
of inclusion, and of humanity, what
Mhm.
gives you the most hope?
Sessions like the other day with you, I think that was great, in terms of just hearing people vibrate in a certain frequency, that kind of just we're not alone trying to push this huge change, and there's different people in different spaces. Something else that gives me hope is that when you're in-depth conversation with leaders, that are seeking for help, and then they have a profound moment where they see how they are stopping the change from happening. They are conscious of it, and then they take this energy in order to change it, in order to question the status quo. When you see that happen in them, which is a privilege to see, that gives me hope, because it's people that are in place of power and that can really mobilize change, and seeing them realize that they've been in the status quo, they've been so caught up in tasks that they haven't been able to look outside of the water, and when they do realize the privilege that they have, and that privilege comes with responsibility, and that they can do something about it, and see them take the next steps in order to start the change, because the change won't doesn't come from one place. It comes from we're from the network of different people making change in their own space, and then eventually connecting, in order to, at the end, it's a tide, right? But it's not going to be individual people. I mean, one person. It's going to be lots of people connecting and mobilizing, because we need it so much. We need it so much.
Yeah. And again, just referencing to the session we had before last week, just for our listeners who are not aware, we brought together all the leadership luminaries from 2024, and we have individuals from over 27 countries. And Kira, indeed, we had such an incredible conversation that we'll be repeating actually for several times. So every quarter we'll be meeting with the other leadership luminaries, just for our audience who who basically is wondering what we are talking about. But it's true. It's when we have those collective connections and we're, as you're saying, we're vibrating at the same level, and there's a shared desire to actually bring a positive impact on this world that I just feel is so powerful and so inspiring. It gives me hope, at least, that there's so many incredible individuals doing so many incredible things in this world. And it's just a matter of choosing where we want to put our energy. And we can choose to look at the negative things, but we can also choose to look at the beauty and the abundance that we have in this world. So happy that you're part of that. So, Kira, if there would be a recipe for living more joyfully, what would be the three main ingredients in your view?
Three main ingredients. The first one, gratitude. I think that's the basis, like I said before, for joy. If you're not grateful, you can't experience joy. Yeah, absolutely. I also think, oh, it's a tough question. I gotta think. Recipe for joy. I think there has to be certain ground, I wouldn't say safety, but certain I'm thinking of Maslow's pyramid. There's a base that needs to be covered, because that takes us out of the survival mode. And if there's joy when we're in survival mode, it's just glimpse. The real joy that is long term, that is constant, that is just not peaks, but something that is powerful. You can't be in survival mode. That base covered. And I think there's a bit of curiosity, that sparks joy. That space when that you're open to joy. You're curious about what's going to happen. You have a an idea. More than idea, it's you're waiting for life to happen, or for life to surprise you. There you go. It's kind of a predisposition that life can surprise you, and it will surprise you, and that sparks joy.
And surprise you in a positive way.
Yes, yes, in a positive way. Yeah, yeah. And it might be something very little. A butterfly just flew by, and that could be something for joy. And there's also like the deeper individual, like I said, that long term joy that you got to build. But I think gratitude, yeah, that safety and that openness to life.
Kira, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience as it relates to joy or the work that you do around inclusion and diversity?
Wow. Okay. Let's say this. Put in the work. That would be my put in the work. It's worthwhile. The personal work of finding your ground, finding your purpose, finding that center in your life, in order for them to go out to the world and do what you love, and mobilize the world, to create the change that we need. But do the work. Do the work. It's important.
Amazing. Kira, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so
Thank you. It was great.